Tonight on Headline Humboldt, new KEET contributor Linda Stansberry brings us a story from the darker sides of Humboldt County, where people have too often been used and abused for pleasure and profit. Also, Ryan Hutson reveals how easy it is for some folks to obtain anonymous firearms, even when everyone else is playing by the rules. Coming up next. This is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Ever since we started this show, our goal has been to bring you as much information as possible in a manner that provides both context and insight. Given the COVID pandemic and the current state of American politics, we've had no shortage of issues to cover and stories to tell. Tonight, though, I feel like we're making a major breakthrough. We've added fresh voices to our news gathering team, and tonight these contributors, people you've long known in other media outlets as dependable and trustworthy journalists, they'll make their KEET debut. We start tonight with longtime local journalist Linda Stansberry, who took on the task these past few weeks of exploring one of Humboldt County's darkest corners. She joins us now. Thanks for coming on the show, Linda.
Thanks for having me.
So I would like to issue a little bit of a warning. There are some terms coming up in the following story that might be disturbing to some folks and to maybe young ears. Little pictures have big ears, that whole principle. So be advised and just make sure that you protect yourself. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Awareness campaigns have slowly changed the public perception of human trafficking, which is defined by some activists as modern-day slavery. Human trafficking is a crime in which people are defrauded of their wages or forced to work without compensation. In the case of sex trafficking, individuals perform commercial sex through the use of fraud, force, or coercion. Any minors under the age of 18 engaging in commercial sex are considered to be victims of human trafficking. To date, only one person has been convicted of human trafficking in Humboldt County. David Bernard Anderson, 49, was sentenced to 9 years in prison on human trafficking charges in 2014, but was released early. In 2018, Anderson was charged with rape, sodomy, lewd acts with a minor, and child sex trafficking after sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl in Eureka. The charge of trafficking was subsequently dropped, but Anderson pled guilty to 4 felony charges, including pandering, false imprisonment, and unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. He was sentenced to 5 years in state prison on April 1st of this year, but subsequently released due to time served. California leads the nation in this crime, with 1,507 cases of human trafficking reported to the National Hotline in 2019. We spoke with investigator Scott Hicks of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, who says that a lack of data does not indicate a lack of a problem.
Humboldt County definitely has labor trafficking and definitely has sex trafficking, the magnitude of which I'd be surprised if anyone was aware of at this point, just because it is so hidden and not talked about. But we definitely have a good amount of labor trafficking in Humboldt County. And a lot of those cases that I have personally seen, they don't even necessarily know that they're being trafficked. They come up here to get a job. Some of the things that, happen seem reasonable. They get to, an area and they're like, okay, well, we want to come work on this grow. And they get put in the back of a van, and made very clear that they don't want them to know where they're at. And they use the excuse that we don't want you telling law enforcement. We don't want you telling people who are going to come rip us off. So they'll be blindfolded or put in the back of a windowless van, taken up to these work sites where they work. And then they work for long periods of time and their basic needs are met. What is shelter for them, adequate food, and they're told that they'll be paid at the end of the season when the harvest comes. Well, when the harvest comes, one thing or another, they don't end up getting paid. A lot of times the victims in those cases don't realize that from the get-go, it was the plan all along to not pay them. Marijuana, of course, plays a big factor in how things go. Also, the amount of cooperation we get, people not wanting to necessarily come forward because they are engaged in marijuana-related activities and they don't want to bring attention to those, or they're fearful that if they start talking to us, that the marijuana teams are going to come in the next week and raid them and stuff like that. I would say that we know very little about the scope of the human trafficking in Humboldt County. Between things that we mentioned before, as far as our remote location, remote locations that things occur, fewer people witnessing. You also have to throw in the things that go along with human trafficking, the mind games that are played, the control that the traffickers have makes the people who are being trafficked less likely to want to talk to law enforcement. So even the cases that we do know about, a lot of times we're not learning about firsthand, we're learning about from service providers who are sharing information with us because the people who are being trafficked do not want to talk to law enforcement. Our role in that regard is just to, gather the information so that we know what's going on for future cases, because their protection's paramount. And if they don't feel safe talking to us, we can't push the issue because we got to make sure that they feel safe with the service providers. So the service providers aren't trying to convince them to come talk to law enforcement, because number one is their safety, not making a police report. If someone's wanting to say that human trafficking doesn't exist because we don't have a lot of statistics on it, there's a lot of stuff that occurs that we don't have numbers for. Just saying that, oh, we don't have the numbers for it, it doesn't exist, is just absolutely false. I mean, I've sat there and seen people who have been trafficked and just absolute fear, and their world's just completely upside down. We also have in our community a lot of very strong people who have been trafficked and been able to come forward and say, hey, this is a real thing, I've been there. Sit down and listen to any of their stories, and you have to be a pretty cold individual to not believe what's going on after hearing these stories and seeing the raw emotion on their face. And it's one thing to come out of this and be a victim of trafficking and be able to get your life back, and it's a whole nother to be able to come out and share your story. So for everybody who's out there saying, hey, I've been there, I've seen it, there's hundreds or thousands, if not more, that are either still in that position or have come out of that position and don't have the same courage to come forward and tell everybody what happened.
One survivor is Tina Taylor, who works with a number of groups combating sex trafficking, including EPI, or Educate, Protect, Invest, a local awareness effort that offers age-appropriate curriculum for elementary and high school students across Humboldt County. Taylor also participates in a survivor circle for people who have escaped trafficking and has trained both police academy recruits and first responders on the patterns of human trafficking, as well as how to recognize and respond to it. Taylor believes that Indigenous women and people working in the cannabis industry can be especially vulnerable to trafficking.
What we know in Humboldt County is that trafficking is happening here. One of the barriers that we had initially, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was that people were clueless that this was happening here. Since then, I've had colleagues and myself who have lived experience and have educated the community, educated law enforcement, El Snow was a trailblazer with doing that. And so I have since stepped into the limelight doing that with her. And so now people are more educated and they understand that it's happening here and that Humboldt County is not exempt. I think nationally, people are vastly more aware than we are here in Humboldt County. I still run into people in Humboldt County who are like, you think that's going on here? And I'm like, yeah, it's going on here. Nationally, I think people are more aware. The conversation has not only been televised, but there's been real documentaries done on it. Unfortunately, people still have this myth that like people are kidnapped and tied up and thrown into a trunk of a car, because for a while people were using these sensationalized like graphic pictures and trying to like make people think that this is the way it's done, when in reality the way that a person is coerced into being exploited or being trafficked is subtly. I'll take care of you. I want to buy you that hamburger. Oh, you don't have anywhere to stay? I can do that for you. 8 times out of 10, the individual who becomes a victim of trafficking, generally the exploiter is known to the trafficked individual. I don't feel like I have the experience and the knowledge completely to talk about it, but I am Native American. And so I am a survivor. So I lead to that population, right? I thank goodness my family knows where I am today, but could I have went missing? Definitely. And I believe that happens because a lot of times, people are trying to get off the reservation or off the hill or whatever that is, and someone meets them where they're at and provides that need for them and then exploits that vulnerability. There's a misconception that only girls are trafficked. Mm-hmm. And the misconception is because it's underreported. 9 times out of 10, a male individual does not want to admit to somebody that he has been sold, that this person took advantage of him and exploited him so that he could have a place to stay, so that he could have some food or whatever the situation might be, right? So therefore, there's more statistics that are gender-based towards women than there is male. But from my experience, it is just as much happening to the male population as it is women. I have come in contact with individuals who need help and resources from entities here in Humboldt County who have come from New Zealand or England or wherever they might be, and they come here because it has been glamorized in other states and other countries about how much money you can make here in Humboldt County. And then when they get here, it's not even like that. I have heard stories from individuals, and so I believe them to be true, because I believe when a person says, this happened to me. I've heard stories where, I worked through the season, and then at the end of the season, the person who was in charge of paying us said, I need you to do X, Y, and Z with me before you get your money. And now I need you to do X, Y, and Z with the rest of my crew. And most of the time they end up not getting their money. And so they're out here kind of penniless, and then because they're penniless, they don't have anywhere to go, so then they become homeless, and they become a statistic. One of the things that for let's say still school age, right? Mm-hmm. If all of a sudden they're staying out all night, most traffickers will want to still keep the appearance of a normal life, so they try to still keep them in school or keep them doing whatever. But one of the grooming tactics is isolating. Your mom and dad or your uncle, they don't. I have your best interest at heart. They don't have it, and so the isolation is number one red flag. Number two, maybe new tattoos, not being able to explain. If you get a new tattoo, you want to tell people what that represents, right? Oh yeah, this is what this means, and whatever. So unable to explain new tattoos and what they mean. Also, not being able to explain why you might have more than one phone. You know, not being able to explain where you do come up with this new Gucci or Coach purse, right? Not being able to explain where you're coming up with new designer clothes. Those are some some red flags that you should look for. So the gaps in specifically to Humboldt County, we have beds at places like North Coast Rape Crisis, Humboldt Domestic Violence. However, I'm speaking from experience. Survivors are a different breed, and here in Humboldt County, we lack housing that is conducive and specifically for trafficked individuals. So that's a huge gap. The other gap that is minimizing, there used to be a huge gap, currently is minimizing because there is meetings that are taking place where organizations and agencies are coming together and they're talking. And we can do more together than we can by ourselves as an individual, right? And so the more people that are coming to this table and talking about what can we do, what resources do we have, how can we communicate together, then the smaller those gaps get. We've seen progress leaps and bounds. Pre-pandemic, there was a group that was meeting monthly, and now post-pandemic, it's just reconvened and started happening again, and that's where agencies are coming to the table. And like I said, and they're talking where that wasn't happening in the past. Today, there are more people who I'm able to have a conversation with who say, oh yeah, I've heard about human trafficking happening here in Humboldt County. Unfortunately, there are still people that I run into that are like, you think that's happening here? And so the lack of knowledge or the being naive to the fact that that's happening here kind of causes a barrier and a gap also. So the more people are aware, if they see something, they say something, then the more that we could close the gap on those resources. And 4 or 5 years ago, people had no idea it was happening.
While statistics about the extent and prevalence of trafficking in Humboldt County have yet to be gathered, we do know that Humboldt County residents have some of the highest rates of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, in the state. Adverse childhood experiences can contribute to increased vulnerability to being trafficked, according to Heidi Messner, a local counselor and co-founder of EPI.
So the ACEs scores in Humboldt County are quite high, and it creates this vulnerability for children and youth. There's a lot that happens when we have trauma. It changes our brain, it changes our ability to know, to sense things. We're kind of unaware of what we should say yes to, what we should say no to. There's a lot of things that change the brain chemistry as well, and the inability to make decisions that are really positive and good decisions for us. So that leaves children and youth who've experienced those kinds of struggles in a very vulnerable place. It also tends to lower self-esteem, and a person really struggles with their own sense of worth, which is a prime target for traffickers. That's exactly what they're looking for, is people who are vulnerable, people who seem like they're not sure of who they are, people who are isolated. And so, yes, it's very tied. The ACEs scores and ACEs issues are very tied to being trafficked. I mean, it's not that would automatically happen, but there's a lot more vulnerability there.
Messner added that while COVID has slowed the momentum of the local anti-trafficking movement, and increase the vulnerability of some people to exploitation. She was heartened to see local high school students rallying recently to support a survivor of alleged sexual assault.
It's been a little challenging in Humboldt County during this pandemic. It created, there was a lot of momentum, first of all, with cross agencies. So we had the county advocates that are working in this field in Humboldt County. We had therapists and some of the people on that end, as well as law enforcement, really working together. And we had a collaboration that was happening. We were meeting regularly to discuss where to go and what things needed to change within each of our agencies and how we could work together. So there was a lot of momentum. And when COVID hit and all of the pandemic started, it really put like just a fast halt to all of that, which has been a little bit challenging because of the fact that this actually is a prime environment right now for trafficking to happen even worse than ever before, because isolation, loneliness, insecurity, low self-esteem, all of these things that often happen when we are isolated from others, and when we're in a place where we feel like we don't have the community around us, it makes people really vulnerable to it. So it really is kind of a prime place and a prime time for vulnerability more than ever. It's part of why I was very happy to see our students at Eureka High stand and do what they did this last week, or a couple days ago, actually, just a few days ago, over something that they had heard and heard that was a problem in their own schools. And so standing up and speaking out, I think the more we do that, the more safe we are. I mean, that's a reality. So it's really important. So I'm very proud of them for what they did. We've got to stand for one another.
For our viewers, if you suspect someone in your family or community is a victim of trafficking, please take action by calling one of the numbers on your screen. Stay smart, stay safe, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, Linda, so much for that story. It's a painful subject to watch and to learn about. I think people always assume it's elsewhere, but it's happening right here.
Right here in our community.
Yeah. I think that your advice to take action is absolutely pivotal. If you see something, say something. I hate to be trite, but that sounds like the thing to do.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
KEET contributor Ryan Hutson this past weekend attended the Loleta gun show and brought back this report from a segment of our community too often left unheard.
Humboldt County hosted a gun and knife show last weekend, saluting the rugged individualism and local gun culture with an arsenal of firepower on display. Local outdoorsmen and women, gun enthusiasts and collectors alike, made their way to the Firemen's Hall in Loleta to admire the gun show and to potentially purchase firearms. Background checks were observed taking place for firearm purchases, although were not necessary to buy items without a serial number, such as ammunition and various gun parts, for example. I spoke with Frank Martinez, who organized the gun show event last weekend.
Humboldt County is a very gun-positive county, and so we've had a real good response. People enjoyed getting out, coming in, talking to different vendors from around the country, and we've really been having a great time.
So you said from around the country?
Around the country, yeah. We've got some folks here who are not from California.
Okay.
We had some folks here from Idaho. We had some folks here from Nevada, and everyone likes to participate in the gun show, and that's what we're trying to do. Trying to get vendors to kind of get out and get into the public again has been difficult because of our COVID pandemic problem. We practiced masking for entry. I'm still, I don't not wearing mine now for the interview, but yeah, we've tried to be conscientious about that. One of the great things about this is the product that are here are available that go back clear into the 1800s. We've got some rifles here that are made by Winchester in 1890. So it's really nice for a person who wants to come in and learn a little bit about firearms. Can come in and see what the old timers were doing and see what is available as modern firearms as well. We have a really good selection of AR products, and we've got a really good selection of hunting products, and it just gives us a little bit of variety. We've had some instruction about reloading and making your own ammunition. Ammunition has been a real tough item to find recently, and we're helping folks learn how to take care of it and manage it themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been great. This is a 5th or 6th year we've done gun shows here in Loleta. We had to take a little pause because of the pandemic. We're trying to reinstitute it, and hopefully if things go well, we'll do it again in the spring.
A person shopping at the gun show in Loleta last weekend could have purchased what are referred to as 80% kits or lowers as parts, which would not come with a serial number. These parts, in combination with the main gun frame or the upper section of the gun, could be assembled to independently build a semi-automatic rifle like the AR-15, potentially without having to undergo a background check at all. The AR-15s on display in Loleta were assembled and modified by the private dealers in order to meet specifications for legal sales in California, in spite of Governor Newsom's efforts to ban assault weapons and the untraceable, quote-unquote, ghost guns configured without serial numbers. Governor Newsom is expected to sign the California State Assembly Bill 1057, which would authorize law enforcement under the state family law code to seize unmarked ghost guns in domestic violence situations, for example, just as they would with traditional firearms. Reporting for Headline Humboldt, I'm Ryan Hutson.
That's all the time we have for tonight. Typically we have a much longer COVID update, so I'll just quickly run through the highlight. I mean, the governor announced today that school kids will be required to get their vaccinations before school starts once those vaccination shots are available for kids those aged. So that's a pretty big deal, I think. I'd also like to personally thank Linda Stansberry and Ryan Hutson for their hard work and professionalism and helping us here at KEET provide our viewers with quality reporting and analysis. To misquote California's former governor, they'll be back. Stay tuned, stay informed.